Nina Reeves had always believed that the universe owed her one clean victory. After all the years clawing her way out of madness, betrayal, and self-inflicted ruin, she had convinced herself that this time she was entitled to control, to clarity, to proof that she could outmaneuver anyone who dared threaten what she called her happiness. So when Jacinda Bracken stepped into her orbit with poised confidence and a carefully measured smile, Nina mistook the moment for destiny. Jacinda spoke in a way that suggested allegiance, that implied she understood the language of leverage, that she was willing to correct the narrative surrounding Michael Corinthos and his polished alibi. It was subtle at first. A few insinuations about inconsistencies, a few well-placed hints that stories could bend under pressure. To Nina, who lived on the thin line between fear and obsession, it sounded like opportunity. Jacinda let her believe that Michael's halo could be shattered, that the legal armor protecting him might crack if the right pressure point was found, and Nina, desperate to secure her own future, reached for the fantasy without questioning why it came so easily. In the quiet corners of her mind, Nina built an expectation. Jacinda would turn, Michael would fall, and she would finally neutralize the son-in-law who never forgave, never forgot, and never stopped circling her like a watchful prosecutor. It was a tempting equation. If Jacinda disputed Michael's pristine timeline, if she hinted at his off-book actions or hidden dealings, Nina might weaponize that fracture, twisting any doubt into leverage over Willow, over Drew, over anyone who thought they could keep her on the outside looking in. It wasn't simply revenge. In Nina's mind, it was survival. She was tired of being the woman at the mercy of someone else's secret. This time, she wanted to hold the secret that made other people blink. But Port Charles has never rewarded those who trust too quickly, and Jacinda Bracken was not the woman Nina decided she was. Beneath the sleek hair, tailored lines, and disarming charm, Jacinda was playing her own game, a longer, colder one. She had taken the measure of Michael Corinthos with the same sharp precision she now used on Nina, and where Nina saw a target, Jacinda saw a partner. Michael did not need another enemy, he needed a shield, a strategist who could move through rooms that he could not enter without raising alarms. Jacinda understood image, understood timing, understood that in a town like this, the suggestion of intimacy could be more powerful than any confession. And so the performance began. Their partnership was born as calculation, nothing more. The first time Michael allowed Jacinda to loop her arm through his in public, it was a message. To Nina. To anyone still whispering about his past choices. To the handful of power brokers in town who watched his every move. The second time, it was a dare. They let their connection simmer in the open, lingering glances at the Metro Court, deliberately casual touches at charitable events, shared conversations where anyone watching could misinterpret subtext as desire. Whispers spread, as whispers always do. Some saw a rebound. Some saw a ploy. Some saw a man trying to move beyond the burden of constant moral high ground. And Jacinda was there for every assumption, adjusting course, feeding speculation when it suited them, refusing to flinch under Nina's scrutiny. Nina tried to lean in, to exploit what she misread. She approached Jacinda with carefully veiled suggestions, circling their supposed common interest, Michael's vulnerability. If Jacinda had once seemed willing to undermine his alibi, surely she might be willing to sharpen that blade. But every time Nina reached for something concrete, Jacinda gave her air. A vague nod. A non-committal phrase. A promise to see what might come up. Instead of damning evidence, Jacinda offered pleasant fog. And while Nina grew impatient, Michael watched, noting every encounter, every attempt to probe, every way Jacinda handled Nina without ever stepping out of line. In private, their alliance hardened into something more dangerous: trust. Pretending to be in love in a town that feeds on spectacle requires discipline. For a while, Michael and Jacinda treated their act like choreography. Every look, every casual brush of fingertips, every shared drink was calibrated for maximum effect. But pretense has its own gravity. Nights ran late. Strategy bled into confession. He learned how ruthlessly she had survived before Port Charles. She learned how heavy his sense of responsibility truly was, how deeply he still carried the damage of his father's choices, his mother's compromises, his own near-fatal mistakes. Somewhere between the staged affection and wary alliance, something genuine flickered. It did not arrive with a grand gesture. It emerged in the way they defended each other in rooms where nobody realized the defense was real. It emerged when Jacinda started protecting Michael not only because it was in the plan, but because it was instinct. That uninvited honesty was the one variable Nina never considered. While Nina miscalculated in plain sight, another front opened far from the gleaming lobbies and curated encounters. Behind prison walls, under the unforgiving lights and hollow echoes of Pentonville, Willow Corinthos wrestled with the kind of dread that strips a person down to their most essential truths. She had been the symbol of steady resilience for so long that some people forgot she was also breakable. Here, stripped of control, time slowed to a crawl. Every hour stretched into a waiting room of worst-case scenarios. Evidence twisted. Motives were questioned. The narrative imprisoning her seemed written by people who barely remembered she was human. Alexis Davis did not forget. She had worn the same uniform of institutional regret, counted the same endless hours, felt the same bone-deep humiliation of being reduced to a case number. When she arrived at Pentonville to see Willow, she did not come as a savior wrapped in polished confidence. She came as someone who understood what it meant to be swallowed by a system that thrived on easy villains. Armed with new fragments of information and the ruthlessness that comes from having lost too much already, Alexis laid out an emerging possibility. Willow's story could be reframed. Not twisted into a lie, but sharpened into a question. A question that pointed away from her, and toward Portia Robinson. It was not accusation for sport. Alexis knew Portia's history, Portia's complicated ethics, Portia's recent desperation. She had watched Portia make choices that blurred the line between medical judgment and personal fear. If reasonable doubt could be anchored in Portia's actions, if evidence or circumstance hinted that someone else might have had opportunity, motive, or divided loyalties, then Willow's defense could shift from pleading for understanding to demanding accountability. Alexis did not present it as a neat solution, but as a strategic pivot. In a town where everyone wears a different mask for each audience, sometimes survival depends on asking out loud who benefits from the story as it stands. For Willow, the suggestion felt like being handed both a lifeline and a blade. Portia had been healer, adversary, reluctant ally, all at once. To allow suspicion to fall on her was to admit that Portia's choices might not have been purely driven by duty or compassion. It meant accepting that someone else's world might have to fracture so hers could be spared. That moral weight settled heavily on Willow's chest. She did not want to be the kind of person who stayed afloat because someone else was dragged under. But Pentonville did not reward purity. Every day inside reminded her that justice was rarely gentle and never simple. If she did nothing, she might lose everything. If she allowed Alexis to pursue this angle fully, she might gain her freedom at the cost of someone else's reputation, career, and family. Alexis saw the conflict and did not soften it. She had learned the hard way that women like them were too often expected to absorb punishment gracefully to prove they were good. Willow was a mother. A survivor. A woman whose life had been dismantled by other people's schemes more than once. Alexis pressed the quiet, brutal truth. In a war built on narratives, refusing to fight was not noble, it was surrender. She promised no guarantees, only that she would not let Willow be devoured without forcing this town to answer harder questions. Whether those questions led to Portia or past her remained to be seen. But the name was on the table now, and the air shifted accordingly. Back on the outside, Nina caught hints of this shift without understanding its origin. She heard Alexis's name tied to Willow's case more often. She caught murmurs of a new legal theory, of alternate suspects, of cracks forming where once the story had seemed locked. Anxiety stirred under her skin. If Willow's case evolved, if new players became entangled, if lines of loyalty and blame were redrawn, then Nina's already tenuous grip on her family's future might slip again. Worse, if Michael emerged from this storm not weakened but reinforced, with Jacinda now anchoring his public image instead of destabilizing it, then Nina would find herself exiled once more from the story she desperately wanted to control. Michael, meanwhile, recognized Nina's desperation as both a threat and a tragedy. He saw how furiously she tried to insert herself into narratives that no longer had room for her manipulations. He also saw that Nina had misread Jacinda completely. What was meant to be her newest pawn had become Michael's fiercest ally. As legal pressure intensified and Alexis worked her angles for Willow, Michael and Jacinda aligned their steps, reinforcing his role as protector, not predator, as man of intention rather than impulsive threat. The more they moved in sync, the less anyone could imagine Jacinda turning on him. The more Nina pushed for a fracture, the more obvious it became that the fracture existed in her own judgment, not in their facade. And yet, Port Charles thrives on dangerous intersections, and all of these threads were quietly converging. Nina, clinging to illusions and weaponized hope. Michael and Jacinda, drifting from performance into something that might one day break his carefully guarded heart or save it. Willow, trapped in a place built to erase her, holding onto Alexis's hard-edged promise of a different narrative. Alexis, unafraid to light a fuse under Portia's spotless image if it meant prying open a path to justice. Portia, unaware that her name was already trembling on the lip of a legal argument that could recast her as guardian, victim, or villain. What none of them could yet see was that the storm they were building was not confined to one case, one romance, or one grudge. Every maneuver was reshaping alliances. Who trusted whom with their freedom, who pretended affection until it started to feel real, who used the truth as a weapon and who bled from it. When the dust finally rose high enough to choke the city, the question would not simply be whether Willow walked free or whether Nina's schemes collapsed. It would be who dared to claim innocence in a town where every kindness carried an angle and every alibi, no matter how polished, came with a cost.